Okay, we're going to look at sine and cosine graphs, and we're going to first look at how we get the calculator up and running as far as using the calculator to create the graph. And this is a sine graph. This is a cosine graph. And we're only going to confine ourselves to these two types of graphs. And the reason, if you take a look, they start from 0 to 360. So we want our calculator to reflect all of this. We can put in to the calculator sine x. I'm just going to get rid of the drawing for a second so I can use sine x, and we're going to put brackets around that. Now I don't know about yours, but mine seems to like brackets around the x. Execute. And if we want to look at a table, if you look at the table will go 0, 0. That's the first point. It will go 91. That's the second point. It will go 180 and 0. And it will go 270, -1, and 360 and 0. Now that's the points that we're interested in. We're going to go from 0 to 360. And the reason that we go from 0 to 360 is because with a sine graph, that is one complete cycle. This graph completes itself. Starting at 0, 0, it goes up, down, back up to this point here, and that's a complete cycle of the sine graph from 0 to 360. And exactly the same for cosine graph. It goes from 0 to 360 and completes itself. So when we draw the graph, we're really only interested from 0 to 360 initially. That shows us a complete cycle of the graph, and that's how we do it. Now, to get your calculator to work properly, you're going to have to play around with your window. I'm just going to exit out of this. When I put, if I exit and I go to graph, and I ask it, if I just delete this, let's just delete it, yes. And so now I put sine back in, sine of x, execute, draw. Now sometimes you won't get this pretty graph, so you're going to have to play with your window. And since you want your window in the x value to go from 0, 360, go by 90s, and it doesn't really matter what the y is doing. The y can be up to -4, down to 4, it doesn't, or 2 or 1, it doesn't really matter. You can play with your trig button, and if you do that, and you ask it to draw, it does this. It still gives you your wave graph, but now it no longer is doing from 0 to 360. So 0, maximum 360, go by 90s, exit out of there, get it to draw it, and so on. Alright, and you can get your values. The values for the graph are very, very straightforward. The values, you just have to remember, if you're going to do a table of values for a sine cosine graph, you start at 0, and that's 0. You go to 90, and it's 1. You go to 180, and that's 0. And you go to 270, and that's -1. And 360 is 0. And if you want to do it for a cosine graph, if you just simply, it's kind of reversed, it's kind of shifted. So you go 0, 0, 0, and 1. Now where the graph starts is very, very significant, because it explains the difference, the significant difference between a sine and a cosine graph. A sine graph will always be at 0, 0. A cosine graph at 0, 1, or some variation thereof. And then as you go to 90, it's 0, to 180, it's -1, to 270, it's 0, and 360, it's 1. So you can see how these things relate. And this is the pattern: 0, 1, 0, -1, 0, 0, -1, 0, +1. That's the pattern, and that's what you need to know about sine and cosine graphs in the basic form without doing anything to them.